The strange thing was not that she walked 3 miles through the snow to return a billionaire's lost dog. The strange thing was that when he tried to pay her, the woman who clearly needed money more than anyone at that gate looked him in the eye and said no. At 10:13 that night, the snow in Denver was falling sideways, thick and white under the security lights of Grant Whitaker's glass mansion on the hill. The driveway had already been cleared twice, but wind kept dragging fresh powder across the black stone like the mountain itself was trying to erase the road. Inside the house, heat glowed behind 12-foot windows, a fire burned cleanly in a long marble fireplace, and a half-finished glass of water sat untouched on a table that cost more than most families spent on rent in a year. Then the gate camera chimed. Grant looked at the screen and stopped moving. A black woman stood outside in an old brown coat dusted white with snow, her shoulders tight against the cold, one gloved hand holding a leather leash, the other pressed around a small pharmacy bag. Her sneakers were soaked through. Her jeans were dark at the cuffs from slush. Her face was tired in a way sleep could not fix, but her back stayed straight. Beside her stood Bentley, Grant's aging golden retriever, his fur wet, his tail moving weakly, his collar hanging crooked from a strap that had almost torn loose. Grant was at the gate before his housekeeper could reach the intercom. He opened it himself, stepping into the storm in a cashmere coat and polished shoes that were not made for weather. "Bentley," he breathed, dropping to one knee as the dog leaned into him. For 6 hours, every security camera, every neighborhood alert, every paid search service had failed to find that dog. And now this woman, shivering under a streetlight, had brought him home. Grant looked up. "How far did you walk?" The woman wiped snow from Bentley's ear before answering. "About 3 miles, sir." His tracker was dead. The address was on the tag. Grant reached into his coat, pulled out a thick fold of cash and held it toward her. "Take this, please." Her eyes moved to the money, then to the warm house behind him, then to the pharmacy bag in her hand, where a child's cough medicine label was half visible through the plastic. For 1 second Grant thought she would take it. Anyone would have. Instead she stepped back. "No, sir," she said quietly. "You do not pay someone for doing the right thing." Grant stared at her, stunned, the money still in his hand. She gave Bentley's leash back like it was something sacred, adjusted the broken collar, and turned toward the road. That was when Grant saw the wet paper tucked under her arm. An eviction notice softened by snow with a red stamp across the top. And before he could ask her name, the woman walked back into the storm as if dignity was the only coat she had left. Grant Whitaker had been offered deals worth 9 figures without blinking, but the woman refusing his money in the snow made him feel, for the first time in years, like he was standing on the wrong side of a locked door. "Wait," he called, stepping farther past the gate as the wind pushed snow against his coat. "At least let me call you a car." The woman stopped but did not turn all the way around. Bentley whimpered behind Grant, pulling once against the leash as if he understood something his owner did not. "No thank you," she said. Her voice was polite, but it carried the practiced firmness of someone who had learned that every favor could come with a hook hidden inside it. "It is late," Grant said. "It is freezing. You walked here. Let me have my driver take you home." She looked back then, and under the gate lights he could see how tired she was. Not dramatic tired. Not the kind people perform when they want help. The kind that lived in the shoulders, in the careful way she held herself upright because if she loosened even a little, the whole day might fall through her. Snow clung to her braids near her hood. One glove had a hole near the thumb. The pharmacy bag was folded tight in her hand, as if whatever was inside mattered more than her own fingers going numb. "My daughter is waiting," she said. "I know the way back." Grant glanced at the paper under her arm again. The red stamp had blurred but not enough. Notice to vacate. He had seen thousands of eviction summaries and reports, always reduced to percentages, units, timelines, risk categories. He had never seen one turning soft under snow against a mother's coat. "Then come inside for 5 minutes," he said. "Warm up. I can make coffee or tea." Something crossed her face, not distrust exactly but memory. "No, sir. I appreciate it. What is your name?" She hesitated. People with money ask names differently. Grant knew that, though he had forgotten how it sounded from the other side. Sometimes a name becomes an invitation. Sometimes it becomes a file. Tanya, she said at last. Tanya Reed. I am Grant Whitaker. She gave a small nod, as if she had already guessed the house belonged to a man whose name appeared on buildings. Bentley pulled again, harder this time, toward Tanya. The old dog's paws skidded slightly on the cleared stone. Tanya immediately stepped forward and crouched, ignoring the snow soaking into her jeans. Easy boy, she whispered, rubbing warmth into one of his ears. You are home now. Grant watched her hands. They were not soft hands. The nails were short. The skin around her knuckles looked dry from winter and work. Still, she touched Bentley with a gentleness that made something in Grant's chest tighten. She had wrapped an old dish towel around the dog's front paw, tied carefully, not pretty but effective, keeping ice from packing between his pads. Grant had paid professional handlers who were less careful. He limped near Federal Boulevard, Tanya said, standing again. Might just be the cold, but you should have your vet check the left front paw. And the tracker on his collar is dead. Battery compartment got wet. I tucked the loose strap under so it would not rub his neck. She said it all like a report, clear and practical, with no request hidden between the words. That unsettled Grant more than if she had asked for $1,000. You did all that and you still will not let me help you? He asked. Tanya looked past him into the house, where warm light spilled over stone floors and a staircase rose like something from a hotel lobby. For 1 second, her expression softened with a tiredness so human it almost felt private. Then she looked back at him. You have your dog back, she said. That is enough for tonight. She turned again. The storm swallowed the edges of her coat almost immediately. Grant stood there with Bentley pressed against his leg, cash still useless in his hand, watching Tanya Reed walk down the long driveway toward the dark road beyond the gates. She did not look back. Not once. But Bentley did. The dog stood facing the road long after Tanya disappeared, ears low, body tense, as if some part of him had left with her. Grant went inside, but the house felt different now. Too warm. Too quiet. Too large. The cash lay on the entry table like an accusation. His housekeeper asked if she should call the police to report Bentley found. Grant answered yes without really hearing himself. His eyes stayed on the security monitor, replaying the grainy image of Tanya at the gate. Old coat. Pharmacy bag. Eviction notice. Refused money. Refused a ride. Refused warmth. People did not refuse help like that for no reason. They refused it because help had once cost them something. At 10:31, Grant called his driver, a retired Army sergeant named Marcus Lee, who had worked for him 8 years and asked very few questions. Marcus, Grant said, there is a woman walking south from my front gate. Brown coat, jeans, carrying a pharmacy bag. Follow from a distance. Do not scare her. Do not stop her unless she is in trouble. Just make sure she gets home safe. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Yes, sir. Grant ended the call and stood beside the window as Bentley lay down near the front door, nose pointed toward the storm. 20 minutes later, Marcus called back. Mr. Whitaker, she did not go home. Grant's hand tightened around the phone. Where is she? 24-hour pharmacy on Colfax. She is inside. Grant closed his eyes, already knowing before Marcus said the rest. She is at the counter counting change. In the silence that followed, the snow tapped softly against the glass. Grant looked at the cash on the table, then at the warm rooms behind him, then at Bentley's broken collar in his hand. The woman who would not take his money was standing under fluorescent lights somewhere across town counting coins for medicine. And Grant understood, with a discomfort he could not name yet, that the question was no longer why she had said no. The question was what kind of world had taught her that saying yes was more dangerous than walking back into the snow. Tanya Reed's day had started 17 hours before Grant Whitaker saw her on the security camera, in an apartment so cold that the inside of the window had a thin white line of frost along the bottom edge. At 5:15 that morning, her phone alarm rang from the floor beside the sofa because the small table next to it had lost a screw and tilted too far to trust with anything breakable. She reached for the phone before the second chime, not because she was rested, but because tired mothers learn to wake quickly when a child is sleeping in the next room. The apartment was quiet except for the old refrigerator clicking on and off and the wind pressing against the taped window in the kitchen. Tanya lay still for 3 seconds, measuring the day before she moved. Nursing home shift until 2:30. Bus to the hotel by 3:15. For rooms to clean if another housekeeper called out. Pharmacy before closing. Maya's cough medicine. Rent office before 5 if she could get there. Groceries if there was anything left. She sat up carefully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, then looked toward the bedroom door. Maya was asleep in the only bed, curled under a thin purple comforter with faded stars, her inhaler on the crate beside her pillow and a plastic cup of water within reach. Tanya had tried not to let her daughter see how cold the apartment had gotten, but 8-year-old children who grow up watching bills on kitchen tables become very good at reading walls, windows, and faces. The heat had stopped working 2 weeks earlier. Carl Benson, the building manager, had said maintenance was backed up and that old units took time. Tanya had sent 3 emails, left 4 voicemails, and written 1 note by hand because sometimes paper felt harder to ignore than a screen. No one had come. So she had placed rolled towels along the window edges, taped clear plastic over the cracked pane above the sink, and moved Maya's bed away from the outside wall. At night, she heated water on the stove and poured it into a bottle wrapped in a towel, placing it near Maya's feet like something from another century. That morning, the stove clicked twice before lighting. Tanya warmed her hands over the burner for a moment, then felt ashamed of the relief and turned it down. Gas costs money too. She opened the refrigerator. 2 eggs sat in the carton, one with a hairline crack. Half a gallon of milk. 3 slices of wheat bread in a bag twisted tight to keep them soft. A plastic container of rice from Sunday. 1 apple with a bruise near the stem. Tanya took out 1 egg in the bread. She left the other egg because tomorrow always had to be negotiated with today. She scrambled the egg with a splash of milk and divided it carefully, most of it onto Maya's plate, the rest spread thin across 1 piece of toast for herself. When Maya came into the kitchen, wearing socks that did not match and a sweatshirt too big for her shoulders, she did not ask why the apartment was cold. She rubbed her eyes, looked at her mother's face and said, "Is it a 2-sweater day?" Tanya smiled because the alternative would have hurt too much. Maybe a 2-sweater and hat day. Maya nodded as if this were weather, not neglect. She climbed into the chair and ate slowly, making breakfast last longer than it was. Her braids were neat from the front, but 2 had loosened near the back where Tanya had been too tired the night before to redo them properly. Tanya noticed and made a mental promise she could not guarantee. Tonight, if Maya was not coughing, if the laundry was dry, if Tanya could keep her eyes open. On the kitchen table, beneath an empty mug, lay the eviction notice. Tanya had turned it face down before Maya woke up, but children notice what adults hide badly. The paper had arrived 3 days earlier, taped to the apartment door with blue painter's tape that peeled paint from the frame when Tanya removed it. Notice to vacate for unpaid balance. The unpaid balance was not unpaid rent. Tanya had paid rent late once in October, on time in November, on time in December after selling her old tablet to a coworker. The balance came from fees. A late processing charge she had already disputed. A winter maintenance assessment no one had explained. A trash violation from a hallway bag that was not hers. And now a pending pet violation from a complaint she had not even understood yet because Tanya did not own a pet. The total was $486.70, which was the kind of number that looks small to people who spent that much on dinner and impossible to someone whose checking account had $42 until Friday. Tanya had called the office. Carl Benson had answered with the slow impatience of a man who believed poverty was a personality flaw. "You need to bring the account current," he said. "I brought it current. The fees are wrong. The system says otherwise. Then the system needs to be corrected." He had laughed softly, not enough for her to accuse him of laughing, just enough for her to hear that her records did not matter to him. "Miss Reed, everybody has a story. Pay the balance or legal will move forward." Since then, the notice had stayed on the table, a paperweight heavier than any object in the apartment. Tanya folded Maya's lunch into a reused plastic bag. Peanut butter on bread, no jelly, half the apple sliced thin, and a little rice in a container because the school cafeteria lunch sometimes upset Maya's stomach. She placed the inhaler in Maya's backpack pocket and checked it twice. "What do we do if you feel tight in your chest?" Tanya asked. Maya sighed with the exhaustion of a child who had been asked the same question too many mornings. "Tell Miss Alvarez. Use my inhaler. Sit up straight. Do not run outside if it is too cold. Good. Tanya kissed her forehead. Maya looked at the face-down paper on the table. Are we moving? The question was so quiet Tanya almost wished she had not heard it. She wanted to lie beautifully, the way mothers in movies lie with confidence and music underneath them. But their apartment had no music. It had a refrigerator that clicked too often and a window that let in wind. Not today, Tanya said. Maya studied her. That is not the same as no. Tanya crouched in front of her daughter and zipped the coat that was too short at the wrists. It means today we do what today needs. You go to school. I go to work. We keep our heads up. We do not let paper scare us before breakfast. Maya nodded, trying to be brave because she had learned bravery made things easier for adults. That was one of the things Tanya hated most about poverty. Not the counting. Not the cold. Not the way shoes wore out at the exact wrong time. It was watching a child become considerate before she had been allowed to be carefree. At 6:02, Tanya locked the apartment door behind them. The hallway light flickered at the far end, turning the stained carpet yellow, then gray, then yellow again. A neighbor's baby cried behind door 214. Someone had placed a pot under a ceiling leak near the stairwell, and the water hit it with a slow metal ping. Tanya held Maya's hand down 2 flights because the railing was loose and the elevator had been out since Monday. Outside, the morning air cut through her coat. Snow had not started yet, but the sky had that flat white look that promised it. Tanya walked Maya 6 blocks to the bus stop for school, then waited until the bus doors closed before allowing herself to cough into her sleeve. Her first shift was at Maple Ridge Senior Care, a nursing home on the west side of the city where the lobby smelled like lemon cleaner, oatmeal, and old carpet. Tanya worked there as a certified nursing assistant. The job demanded tenderness from people who were paid as if tenderness were unlimited. She helped residents sit up, changed sheets, cleaned spills, found missing glasses, listened to the same stories more than once because loneliness does not care that a worker is behind schedule. At 9:40, Mrs. Donnelly grabbed Tanya's wrist and asked if the snow had come yet. Not yet, Tanya said. But it is thinking about it. Mrs. Donnelly smiled. You always make weather sound like a person. Tanya tucked the blanket around her knees. Weather acts like people sometimes. Shows up when it wants, leaves a mess for somebody else. Mrs. Donnelly laughed, then looked at Tanya's bare hand. Where are your good gloves? Tanya flexed her fingers. The right glove had split at the thumb last week, and the left was damp from helping clear ice near the entrance before clocking in. These still work, she said. Mrs. Donnelly did not argue. Old women who have lived long enough recognize pride when it is protecting a wound. By 2:37, Tanya had missed the first bus to her second job because a resident needed help calling her son and no one else had time. She stood at the stop in wind sharp enough to make her eyes water, eating her own piece of toast from a napkin because lunch had been a luxury the schedule did not allow. Her phone battery was at 18%. Maya's school had not called. That was good. The landlord had texted a reminder about the balance. That was not good. The hotel shift was supposed to be short. For rooms maybe 5. It became 7 because another housekeeper slipped on ice and went home early. The hotel guests left towels in wet piles, room service trays outside doors, glitter from some conference event ground into carpet near the elevators. Tanya cleaned without complaining. Complaining burned energy and did not change the checkout list. At 6:18, her supervisor asked if she could stay an extra hour. Tanya thought of the rent notice. Then of Maya at the neighbor's apartment waiting to be picked up. Then of the pharmacy. I can do 40 minutes, she said. Not an hour. The supervisor looked disappointed, as if Tanya had invented motherhood to inconvenience the schedule. By the time Tanya reached the pharmacy, snow had begun falling in earnest. Maya's cough medicine was on the lower shelf, generic brand, children's night formula. Tanya stood under fluorescent lights and checked the price against the cash in her wallet and the coins in the bottom of her work bag. She bought the smaller bottle. Not because it was enough, but because enough and affordable rarely stood on the same shelf. She was 2 blocks from home when she first saw the dog. Bentley was near a bus shelter, golden fur wet, leash dragging, one paw lifted slightly from the cold. People hurried past, shoulders hunched, faces turned away from the storm. Tanya stopped because the dog looked lost in the same way children sometimes looked lost in grocery stores trying to be calm because panic might make the world bigger. "Hey baby," she said softly, crouching despite the snow soaking through her jeans. Bentley did not run. He looked at her with old brown eyes and shivered. Tanya checked the collar. The leather was expensive, the metal tag engraved with an address in the hills, miles away, and a phone number. Her own phone was at 4%. She called once. No answer. The screen went dark before voicemail finished. Tanya looked toward her apartment building, then toward the road leading west. Maya was waiting. The medicine was in her bag. Her feet already hurt, but the dog leaned his head against her knee, and Tanya could hear her own mother's voice from years ago, saying that doing right does not become optional just because nobody is watching. She took the old towel from her work bag, wrapped Bentley's cold paw, and began walking. She told herself she would find a working phone along the way. She told herself it would only be a mile. Then another. Then another. The city changed as she climbed toward the neighborhoods where houses sat farther apart, and snow looked decorative instead of dangerous. Streetlights grew warmer. Driveways grew longer. Windows glowed behind glass tall enough to show entire rooms no one seemed to be sitting in. Bentley walked beside her, slow but trusting. Tanya's coat grew heavier with wet snow. The pharmacy bag stayed tucked under her arm. The eviction notice, which she had brought because she planned to stop by the rent office before the storm worsened, softened against her side. By the time she reached Grant Whitaker's gate, she had stopped feeling her toes. But Bentley was home. That mattered. And when the billionaire opened the gate and offered her money, Tanya saw more than cash. She saw every time a person with more power had tried to turn her dignity into a transaction. She saw the paper under her arm. She saw Maya asking if they were moving. She saw her mother's tired hands returning something that was not hers and being treated like gratitude should erase disrespect. So Tanya said no, not because she did not need help, but because she needed one thing in her life: to remain clean. She had brought the dog home because it was right. And some things, even in the cold, even under eviction, even with only coins left for medicine, could not be sold back to the rich. Grant Whitaker did not become a billionaire because he loved buildings. He became one because buildings were the first things in his life that seemed impossible to move, and as a boy, he had watched everything else move against his will. By the time he was 49, he owned apartment complexes, hotels, retail centers, parking structures, and parcels of land across Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and Texas. His company, Whitaker Holdings, occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower in downtown Denver, where the conference rooms were named after mountain ranges and the windows were so clean the city looked like a model someone had built for him. His employees called him disciplined. Investors called him surgical. Reporters called him self-made, which was true in the way headlines are often true and incomplete. Grant wore dark suits tailored in New York, cashmere coats that felt weightless in winter, Italian leather shoes polished before he ever saw them, and a watch with a black face that cost more than the house he had grown up in. He traveled in a black sedan with heated seats, answered emails before sunrise, ate lunch at his desk unless someone important required a restaurant, and measured time in closings, quarterly returns, refinancing windows, occupancy rates, and projected yield. To most people, he looked like a man who had mastered the world because nothing on his face suggested the world had ever mastered him first. But every system Grant built began with one night he never talked about. He was 12 years old, standing in a motel parking lot outside Aurora with snow coming down hard enough to blur the neon vacancy sign. His mother, Ellen Whitaker, held 2 trash bags of clothes in one hand and his school backpack in the other. Their landlord had changed the locks that afternoon after 3 months of late rent, and too many promises stretched beyond mercy. Ellen had worked at a diner near Colfax, the kind of place where coffee was refilled before customers asked, but paychecks never seemed to refill enough. She had tried to shield Grant from the worst parts of being poor, but children know when adults count coins in the bathroom because the kitchen table feels too public. That night, Ellen did not cry in front of him. She stood under the motel awning with snow melting in her hair and said, "This is not who we are, baby. This is just where we have to sleep tonight." Grant believed her because he needed to, but something in him hardened anyway. Not hatred, not exactly ambition, something colder. A promise that one day nobody would have the power to decide where he slept, how long he stayed, or what door closed in his face. He kept that promise so completely that he eventually forgot what it had cost him to make it. The boy in the motel parking lot became the man in the glass mansion on the hill. He studied finance at the University of Colorado on scholarship, worked nights doing property inspections for a small management company, then discovered that buildings were not only shelter, they were leverage. They could be bought with other people's money, improved with borrowed money, refinanced with rising value, bundled, sold, converted, optimized. The words were clean. They did not smell like motel carpet or diner grease or fear. Grant liked that. He liked that real estate could turn pain into math. His first apartment building had 12 units and a boiler that failed every February. He fixed it himself because he could not afford anyone else. His second building had 32 units. His third had 108. By 36 he had investors. By 42 he had a national portfolio. By 49, he was the kind of man city officials called before zoning changes became public and bankers invited to private rooms before the rest of the market knew money had shifted. He did not think of himself as cruel. That was important. Men like Grant rarely do. He donated to housing nonprofits. He funded winter coat drives. He sat on panels about urban renewal and nodded gravely when people spoke about affordability. But in his own company's reports, poor tenants had become categories: high risk, leaseholders, low-yield occupants, transition candidates, delinquency clusters, rent increase tolerance. Grant did not write those phrases, but he approved the reports that used them. He told himself precision prevented emotion from clouding judgment. He told himself scale required distance. He told himself if he stopped to consider every family behind every number, nothing would get built, nothing would improve, nothing would grow. Growth became the word that made every other word easier to ignore. His home reflected the life he had constructed around control. The mansion sat above Denver behind a stone wall and a black iron gate, all glass, steel, walnut, and quiet. The driveway heated itself in winter. The garage held 3 cars he rarely drove. The kitchen had 2 ovens, though most meals arrived from restaurants in containers that were plated by staff before he entered the room. The bedroom overlooked the city, but Grant usually slept 4 hours and woke before dawn with his phone already in his hand. There were no family photographs on the main floor except one black and white picture of his mother sitting on a park bench, Bentley as a puppy at her feet. She had found Bentley years after Grant became successful, when he finally bought her a small house in Lakewood with a garden and a porch she used every morning. She used to say the dog was the first creature in her life that did not need her to work overtime to deserve love. Grant had smiled when she said it, but he had been on calls too often to hear the loneliness beneath the joke. Ellen died 4 years before the night Bentley disappeared. A stroke, sudden and clean in the medical language, which made it sound less devastating than it was. Grant inherited the dog because there was no one else, and at first he treated Bentley like another responsibility assigned to staff. Feeding schedule, vet appointments, grooming, yard access. But Bentley was stubborn in the patient way of old dogs. He followed Grant from room to room. He rested his head on Grant's knee during late calls. He slept outside the office door until Grant opened it. Over time, the dog became the only living thing in the mansion that did not want anything from him except presence. That was why, when Bentley went missing at 4:27 that afternoon, Grant reacted less like a man who had lost a pet and more like a man whose last unlocked memory had wandered into the cold. The gate had malfunctioned during a delivery. Bentley had slipped out. The tracker failed. Staff searched the property. Marcus drove the neighborhood. Grant called a private pet recovery service, then another. He watched camera feeds until his eyes hurt. He snapped at a housekeeper for asking whether he wanted dinner, then apologized 10 minutes later because Ellen would have hated that tone. By 9 o'clock, the snow was heavy. By 10 o'clock, Grant stood in his foyer feeling something he had not felt since childhood: helplessness without a useful task attached to it. Then the gate camera chimed, and Tanya Reid appeared under the light with Bentley beside her. After she left, Grant tried to return to himself. He told himself he had offered money. He had offered a ride. He had done what decency required. But the house would not let him believe it. The fire was too warm. The glass walls reflected him too clearly. Bentley refused to leave the front door. And on the entry table sat the broken collar, wet at the edges, smelling faintly of snow, dog fur, and the outside world Grant had paid so much to keep beyond the gate. When Marcus called from the pharmacy and said Tanya was counting change, Grant walked to the window and looked down at Denver. The city spread beneath him in dots of light. Somewhere below, the woman who had returned his dog was standing under fluorescent lights with a pharmacy bag, deciding which medicine she could afford for her child. He pictured the eviction notice under her arm and felt an old image rise without permission. His mother under the motel awning, trash bags at her feet, saying this is just where we have to sleep tonight. Grant gripped the phone harder. Stay with her, he told Marcus. From a distance. Yes, sir. And Marcus. Sir. Grant looked at Bentley, who had lifted his head at the sound of Tanya's name though no one had spoken it aloud. Get me the address when you can. Marcus hesitated. You want to send help? Grant almost said yes. That would have been easy. Send a car, send cash, send a gift card, send a solution that arrived like a clean envelope and required nothing from him except generosity. But Tanya had already refused that version of help. And for reasons Grant did not yet understand, her refusal had reached a place in him that praise, money, and fear had not touched in years. No, he said finally. I want to know why a woman with an eviction notice would rather walk through a snowstorm than take money from me. He ended the call, picked up Bentley's collar, and turned it over in his hands. The broken tracker stared back at him like a dead eye. Grant had built an empire by believing every problem could be identified, priced, and controlled. But Tanya Reed was not a problem. She was a mirror. And what made him uneasy was not that she had said no to his money. It was that some part of him already knew she had been right to. Grant did not see Tanya again that night. But the distance between their lives became impossible to ignore the moment Marcus began sending updates from the road. At 10:48, Marcus texted that she had left the pharmacy with one small bag and no ride. At 10:56, he said she was walking east with her hood down because the wind kept pushing it back. At 11:08, he reported that she stopped under a bus shelter, not to rest, but to tuck the pharmacy bag inside her coat so the medicine would stay dry. Grant stood in his heated foyer reading each message while Bentley lay beside the door, nose pressed to the narrow seam where cold air slipped in. Behind Grant, the house was quiet enough to hear the fire adjust itself. Ahead of him on the security monitor, the driveway lights reflected off untouched stone. Somewhere miles away, a woman who had just returned the last living piece of his mother's memory was walking through snow with medicine she had counted coins to buy. The contrast was so sharp it felt almost indecent. Grant walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator without knowing why. Inside were glass containers labeled by his chef. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, lemon chicken, winter soup, sliced fruit. Food. Prepared, portioned, chilled, waiting for a man who often forgot to eat it. He thought of Tanya's pharmacy bag, then of the eviction notice pressed under her arm. He closed the refrigerator, took Bentley's broken collar from the entry table, and went into his office. The room faced the city. At night, Denver looked peaceful from that height. Every hardship softened into lights. Grant sat at his desk, turned on the lamp, and examined the collar under the warm circle of light. It was expensive leather, custom-made, with Bentley's name stamped in brass. The tracker compartment was cracked along one edge, moisture trapped under the cover. Tanya had been right. The device was dead. She had seen the problem immediately, adjusted the strap, protected Bentley's paw, and returned him without making any of it dramatic. Grant opened his laptop and typed Tanya Reed into a private search database his company used for tenant screening and vendor background checks. He stopped before pressing enter. The habit itself unsettled him. A woman had done something decent, and his first instinct was to turn her into data. Name, address, risk score, court filings, payment history. That was what his world did. It converted people into searchable fields, then pretended the fields were the person. He closed the tab. A minute later Marcus called. She is home, he said. Grant straightened. Where? Marcus gave him the address. Cedar Ridge Apartments. Building C. Unit 217. Grant went still. The name was familiar in the vague way of assets reviewed in quarterly summaries. Cedar Ridge. South edge of Denver. 216 units. Built in the 1980s. acquired through a subsidiary, not directly under the Whitaker Holdings brand. Scheduled for repositioning. That word sat in Grant's mind like a stain. Repositioning. In investor language, it sounded strategic. In human language, it often meant people who could barely stay were about to be priced out or pushed out. You are sure? Grant asked. Yes, sir. She went in through the side entrance. No one else with her. Did she seem all right? Marcus paused. She stopped on the stairs for a bit. Looked tired. But she made it inside. Grant looked down at Bentley, who had lifted his head. Thank you. He ended the call and sat very still. Cedar Ridge was his. Not in the way his mansion was his, not emotionally, not visibly, but through layers of ownership, liability companies, operating agreements, and management contracts. The building Tanya had walked back to belonged to the empire he controlled. He had not known her name an hour ago, yet his company knew how much rent she owed, what fees had been added, whether she was considered stable or removable. The realization did not arrive as guilt at first. It arrived as irritation at the complexity. Then irritation turned into something heavier because Grant recognized the shape of his own defense. Complexity was the excuse he used when the truth was close enough to touch. At 11:23, he called Evelyn Shaw, his general counsel, even though she had texted earlier that she was finally going to sleep after a 14-hour negotiation. She answered on the third ring, her voice clear but cautious. Grant, if the Phoenix closing is on fire, I need you to start with the part that burns fastest. I need information on Cedar Ridge Apartments. A pause. Tonight. Now. Is there a lawsuit? Not yet. Another pause, sharper this time. Evelyn knew him well enough to hear when a business question had something personal under it. What am I looking for? Grant turned the broken collar in his hand. Tenant ledger. Management company. Open complaints. Eviction notices. Any unusual fees added in the last 90 days. And a tenant named Tanya Reed, Unit 217. Evelyn did not ask why immediately. That was why she was good. She typed for several seconds. Grant heard keys through the phone, then the soft exhale of someone finding the first thing that did not belong. Cedar Ridge is under North Star Residential Services. Manager is Carl Benson. You approved the renewal strategy last quarter. I approve many strategies. I know. This one included tenant transition, fee enforcement, and vacancy optimization before capital improvements. Grant closed his eyes. There they were. The clean words. The polished knives. Translate. Evelyn's voice changed slightly. Less lawyer, more woman who knew what language could hide. They are increasing pressure on lower margin tenants before renovations. Late fees, compliance fees, maintenance chargebacks, lease violations. Some may be legitimate. Some may be aggressive. Grant looked at the dark glass of the office window and saw his own reflection behind the city lights. Tanya Reed. More typing. Current tenant. Single adult with one dependent listed. Rent generally paid, sometimes late but cured. Recent balance of $486.70. For what? Late processing charge. Winter maintenance assessment. Trash violation. Administrative notice fee.
Pending paid violation.
Grant's hand tightened around Bentley's collar. She does not have a pet. According to the file, the manager noted an unauthorized animal reported near Unit 217. Grant stood so quickly his chair rolled back. When? This evening. Time stamped 9:42. He looked at Bentley. The old dog blinked back at him from the rug, tired and safe. Tanya had found the dog, sheltered him, walked him 3 miles, refused money, and while she was doing the right thing, his management system had already started converting her kindness into a violation. Remove it, Grant said. I can flag it pending review. Remove it. Evelyn was quiet. Grant, if I alter a tenant ledger without documentation, I create a different problem. Let me pull the backup first. He hated that she was right. He hated that documents moved with more protection than people. Then pull it fast. There is more, Evelyn said. He did not answer. There are multiple maintenance complaints from that building. Heat, water pressure, elevator outages, hallway lighting. Some open beyond normal response time. How many? Enough that I do not want to answer until I have the full report. Grant walked to the window. Below, Denver disappeared and reappeared behind sheets of snow. He thought of his mother in the motel parking lot. He thought of Tanya's daughter waiting in a cold apartment with cough medicine beside her bed. He thought of Bentley's paw wrapped in a towel by a woman whose own building could not be bothered to keep heat working. "Send me everything," he said, "and find out whether Carl Benson knew about the heat complaints." Evelyn's voice was careful now. If he is following the transition strategy too aggressively, this could become a serious exposure issue. Exposure to whom? Grant asked. Tenants? Regulators? Media? All of the above. Good, Grant said, surprising himself. Maybe exposure is what it needs. He ended the call before she could respond. For the rest of the night, Grant did not sleep. He sat in his office while reports arrived one by one, each of them wearing the dead language of property management. Unit condition variance. Resident compliance note. Deferred repair. Strategic vacancy. Tanya Reed appeared in the ledger as a balance, a risk, a pending notice. Maya Reed appeared only as dependent child, age 8. No mention of the inhaler. No mention of the cold bedroom. No mention of a mother dividing one egg before sunrise. No mention of a dog returned through snow. At 1:12 in the morning, Grant opened the Cedar Ridge portfolio summary he had approved 3 months earlier. His signature sat on the final page. The report recommended increasing fee enforcement to improve turnover ahead of redevelopment options. He remembered the meeting. There had been coffee. A graph. Someone said the property was underperforming. Someone else mentioned that current residents were resistant to market adjustment. Grant had nodded. He had asked about projected yield. He had not asked where people would go. That omission now sat heavier than any decision he had made aloud. Meanwhile, Tanya was in Unit 217, trying not to wake Maya as she came through the door. The apartment was colder than when she left. The medicine bottle clinked softly against the counter. Maya stirred from the bedroom. "Mama!" Tanya removed her wet coat quickly and forced warmth into her voice. "I am here, baby." Maya appeared in the doorway with the blanket around her shoulders, hair loose on one side, eyes sleepy and worried. "You were gone a long time." "I know." Tanya knelt to take off her daughter's socks and check whether her feet were warm enough. "I found somebody's dog." Maya blinked. "In the snow." "In the snow." Was he scared? Tanya thought of Bentley leaning against her knee under the bus shelter. A little. But he was brave. Maya nodded seriously, accepting this as important. Did his family cry? Tanya smiled faintly. His man looked like he forgot how to talk. Maya sat on the edge of the bed while Tanya measured medicine into the small plastic cup. Did they give you money? Tanya's hand stopped for half a second. He offered. Did you take it? No. Maya looked at her with a child's honest confusion. Not judgment. Just math. Children in poor homes learn math early. Medicine costs money. Rent costs money. Heat costs money. Money offered is money useful. Tanya sat beside her. Maya, when you do the right thing, you do not always have to let somebody turn it into a purchase. Maya thought about that, then looked toward the kitchen where the eviction notice still lay face down. But what if we need it? Tanya's throat tightened. She brushed a loose braid back from her daughter's cheek. Then we still remember who we are while we figure it out. It was not a complete answer. Poverty rarely allows complete answers. Maya drank the medicine and leaned into her mother's side. Tanya held her until the coughing eased, listening to the wind press against the taped window. She did not know that across the city, in a mansion with heated floors, Grant Whitaker was reading the words pet violation beside her name. She did not know that he had discovered Cedar Ridge belonged to him through a chain of companies designed to keep responsibility clean and distant. She did not know that Bentley, safe on a wool rug, kept lifting his head every time the wind struck the door. Two worlds had touched for less than 5 minutes at a gate in the snow. One was warm, insured, documented, protected by lawyers and walls. The other was cold, overcharged, and one notice away from falling apart. Grant had spent his life believing those worlds were separated by effort, discipline, and scale. Tanya had spent hers knowing the separation was often paperwork. By dawn the snow had stopped. Grant stood in the same clothes he had worn the night before, surrounded by reports, his eyes fixed on a single line in the Cedar Ridge ledger. Unauthorized animal fee pending. He picked up Bentley's collar and placed it beside the signed portfolio summary. The rich man's lost dog had been treated with more care than the woman who found him. And for the first time in years, Grant Whitaker could not make the numbers look clean. The first thing Spencer noticed was not the mattress anymore. By then, the mattress had become part of the street, part of the heat, part of the slow, painful rhythm of a woman refusing to stop because stopping would mean admitting that she had nowhere left to go. What caught his eye was the corner of a folded paper sticking out from the back pocket of her jeans. It had been folded too many times. The edges were soft and gray from being opened, closed, opened again, carried through bus rides, offices, waiting rooms, and probably 1 or 2 nights when she had sat somewhere under bad light trying to make the words on it turn into mercy. Every time she shifted the mattress, the paper moved. Every time the wind came between buildings, one corner lifted. Spencer saw black ink through the thin paper. A number. Then part of a street name. Then the shape of a handwritten circle around something. He should not have been close enough to read it. He knew that. He also knew he had already crossed the line between observing and being involved. The moment he told the driver to stop, the woman reached the curb and let the mattress fall upright against a brick wall. Not hard. Carefully. Even exhausted, she protected the thing as if it still mattered. As if a stained mattress wrapped in an old sheet deserved to be treated like furniture and not evidence of failure. Her little girl set the trash bag down beside her and flexed her fingers one at a time. The woman saw it. She knelt, took the child's hands, and blew gently across the small red marks the plastic handles had left. She did not say I am sorry. She did not say I failed you. She said, almost smiling, you carried that like a champion, baby. The girl lifted her chin. I did not drop it once. Not once, the woman said. That counts. Spencer stood 10 feet away with a phone worth $1,200 in his hand, and no idea what to do with it. In every room he entered, people waited for him to speak. Attorneys paused for him. Bankers leaned forward for him. City officials rearranged schedules for him. But here on Delancey Street, next to a mattress leaning against a wall and a child proud of not dropping a trash bag, his language did not work. The woman stood again and reached into her pocket. The folded paper came out with her hand. She opened it, smoothing it against the wall with her palm. Spencer saw the address then. Not all of it, not yet. Just the number at the top, written in blue ink over a printed line. 714. His breath changed before his mind did. He had not spoken that number in 19 years. He had avoided it so completely that he had convinced himself memory could be treated like property, bought out, closed, demolished, replaced. But numbers do not need permission to return. 714 Delancey had been his mother's last address before everything fell apart. 714 Delancey had been the place where she taped plastic over the kitchen window in January, because the landlord would not fix the crack. 714 Delancey had been the apartment where Spencer learned that hunger had a sound, the soft closing of cabinets after someone already knew nothing was inside. The woman turned the paper sideways, checking something against the building across the street. Spencer followed her eyes. The building in front of her was not 714. It was 712. A laundromat now, though the sign was faded and half the letters had gone dark. Next door, behind a chain-link construction fence, sat the lot where 714 used to be. Empty. Flattened. Gravel spread over dirt. A blue permit notice zip-tied to the fence. Voss Urban Renewal Phase 2. Spencer looked at the sign and felt the first clean crack of understanding move through him. Not guilt yet. Guilt was too simple. This was something colder, more precise. His company owned this lot. His company had cleared this block. His company had sent notices through a management office he had never visited, signed documents through an assistant, reviewed numbers on a tablet in the back of a car while people like this woman carried the consequences by hand. The woman pressed the paper against the fence now, comparing the printed notice taped there with the paper she carried. The little girl stood beside her, looking through the metal diamonds of the fence at nothing but gravel. Mama, the girl said, is this the place? The woman did not answer right away. She read the fence notice again. Her lips moved slightly, Not reading aloud, just trying to make the words behave. Temporary relocation. Final possession. Failure to vacate. Unauthorized occupancy prohibited. Words built to sound official instead of cruel. Spencer saw her swallow. It was, she said. The girl looked up. But there is no door. The woman folded the paper once, then stopped because her hands were shaking. She made them still. Spencer saw the effort. It was not dramatic. It was worse. It was private discipline performed in public. I know, she said. We are going to figure out the next step. The girl accepted that because children accept the shape of their mother's voice before they understand the facts inside it. Spencer stepped closer. Excuse me. The woman turned fast, one hand moving toward her daughter, not grabbing her, just placing herself between the child and the stranger in the suit. Her eyes went first to his shoes, then his watch, then the black car waiting half a block behind him. She understood money before she understood him. Most people did. I am not asking for anything, she said. The sentence hit him harder than if she had asked for cash. It came out ready, practiced, held at the front of her mouth like identification. I am not asking for anything. The official defense of people who have learned that need is often mistaken for dishonesty. I know, Spencer said, though he did not know. Not really. I saw you carrying the mattress. A lot of people saw me carrying it. There was no bitterness in her voice. That was what made it land. It was just information. Most kept walking. Spencer looked at the fence again. Is that the address you were given? She held the paper tighter. Who are you? He could have said his name. He could have said he owned the company on the notice. He could have said he was the reason the gravel was there instead of a hallway, a mailbox, a second-floor unit where a child might have slept tonight. But the words would not come clean. My name is Spencer. Her face changed slightly. Not recognition. Caution sharpening. Spencer what? Before he answered, the little girl tugged gently at her mother's shirt. Mama, his name is on the sign. The woman looked. Spencer did not. He already knew what she was seeing. Voss Urban Renewal. Black letters on whiteboard. Professional. Neutral. Expensive enough to make destruction look like progress. Her eyes came back to him slowly. You are Voss. He heard all the meanings inside those 3 words. Not a name. A verdict. Not anger yet. Anger required safety, and she did not have enough safety to spend it. Yes, he said. The little girl looked from him to the sign, trying to understand how a person could be a word on a fence. The woman folded the paper again, smaller this time, as if shrinking the evidence might shrink the humiliation. Then we are leaving. She bent to lift the mattress. Spencer reached out without thinking. Wait. Her body went still, but she did not take her hands off the mattress. Do not touch my things. He pulled his hand back immediately. I am sorry. People keep saying that right before they take something. That was when Spencer noticed the second detail. Not the paper. Not the address. The key. It hung from a thin red string around her daughter's neck, tucked under her yellow shirt but visible now because the shirt had shifted. A small brass key, old, dark at the teeth, with a round plastic tag so faded the writing should have been gone. But it was not gone. Spencer could read enough. 714B. His mother's unit had been 714B. The world narrowed to that key. His driver's door closed somewhere behind him, but the sound arrived from far away. Heat pressed against the back of his neck. A bus groaned at the corner. Someone laughed outside the laundromat. The city continued with the brutal confidence of a place that does not stop for private collapse. Where did you get that key? Spencer asked. The woman pulled her daughter closer. Why? His voice had changed. He knew it because her face changed too. He had sounded less like a businessman and more like a man who had just seen a ghost on a child's chest. He tried again, softer. The key. The one she is wearing. The little girl touched it through her shirt. It was Grandma Ruth's, she said. The woman looked down. Maya. Not angry. Warning. The girl lowered her hand. Spencer could not move. Ruth. His mother's name had been Ruth Booker before she married. Ruth Voss after. Ruth Booker again on the envelope she received when she stopped wanting his father's name in the house. Nobody on this block should have been carrying that name now. Nobody connected to this demolition file should have had a key to unit be hanging around a child's neck like a family relic. Your grandmother was Ruth? He asked. The woman studied him. My mother was Ruth. The correction was immediate. Protective. Final. Spencer felt the ground of the story shift under him. Not enough to reveal the truth. Just enough to prove that a truth existed. Ruth Booker. The woman's eyes narrowed. How do you know my mother's name? There it was. The unusual thing. Not poverty. Not eviction. Not a mattress carried under summer heat. Those were tragedies the city produced every day and trained powerful men not to see. The abnormal detail was a key that should have disappeared when the building came down. A name that belonged to his past inside a stranger's mouth. A woman standing in front of land he owned, carrying a paper from his company, wearing exhaustion-like armor, and protecting a child who carried Spencer's dead mother's address against her chest. For one moment he almost told her everything. He almost said that Ruth Booker had raised him in that unit, that he had eaten government cheese at a table by the window, that he had promised himself he would own buildings one day so no landlord could ever decide his life again. But then he saw the paper in her hand. He saw the mattress. He saw the child. And he understood that whatever this connection was, it did not make him innocent. It made the damage worse. The woman slid the folded notice into her pocket. We need to go. Where? Spencer asked. She gave a short laugh with no humor in it. That is a rich question. The child looked at her mother. Are we going to the church? The woman closed her eyes for half a second. That was the first answer. The second answer was in the way she adjusted her grip on the mattress again, preparing to drag it farther even though her arms were already trembling. Spencer looked at the construction fence, then at the key, then at the place where a door used to stand. His whole life he had believed he escaped this block. Now the block had found him through a little girl with a red string around her neck. Please, he said. It was the wrong word or maybe the only honest one he had used all day. The woman paused. Please what? Spencer looked directly at her then. Not at the mattress. Not at the paper. Not at the sign with his name on it. Let me see that notice. She did not hand it to him. Her dignity would not allow the quick surrender of the last document that proved what had happened to her. So she unfolded it herself and held it up where he could read without touching. Spencer read the date. Read the unit. Read the relocation contact. Read the signature at the bottom from a property manager. He had promoted 2 months earlier for efficiency. Then he saw the line that did not belong. Tenant declined relocation assistance. The woman watched his face. I never declined anything, she said quietly. Nobody offered. Spencer read the line again, and this time the crack inside him widened into something that finally had a name. Not pity. Not confusion. Evidence. Somewhere between the boardroom and this fence, someone had turned a mother and child into a checked box, and his company had built an empire around never asking whether the boxes were true. He looked at the little brass key. He looked at the empty lot. He looked at the woman who had not asked him for a single dollar. And he knew that the first clue had not answered the mystery. It had opened a door much older than the building that used to stand there. Spencer did not follow her at first. That was the strange part. For years he had followed numbers without hesitation, followed legal language, followed market movement, followed opportunity into neighborhoods where his own childhood would have recognized the smell of stairwell paint and unpaid gas bills. But he could not make his feet follow a woman and a child carrying everything they could not afford to lose. Not immediately. He stood by the fence while the paper in her hand went back into her pocket, and the little brass key disappeared again beneath Maya's yellow shirt. The red string was the last thing he saw before the mattress shifted, and the two of them began moving away from the empty lot. 3 feet. Stop. 3 more feet. Stop. The same rhythm as before, except now every scrape of the mattress along the sidewalk sounded personal. His driver, Curtis, stepped beside him without speaking. Curtis had been raised in Newark by a grandmother who never wasted words on men who were already ashamed. He looked at the woman, then at the sign on the fence, then at Spencer. Sir, he said quietly, do you want me to bring the car around? Spencer opened his mouth, but the answer did not come. He was not thinking about the car. He was thinking about a kitchen floor with 2 cracked tiles near the sink, a refrigerator that hummed too loud at night, and a woman named Ruth standing over a pot of rice with one hand on her lower back because she had already worked 2 shifts before dinner. Memory did not return as a story. It returned as objects. A blue plastic bowl. A school permission slip he never turned in because it required $8. A winter coat with sleeves too short by February. A rent envelope sealed with tape because the glue had dried out. He had not remembered those things in order for years. He had trained himself to remember the lesson, not the texture. The lesson was simple. Never be at the mercy of a landlord again. Never let a man with keys decide whether your mother slept under a roof. Never stand in front of a locked door with a child beside you and no way to make it open. That lesson had become a company. Then the company had become a weapon in someone else's hand. Spencer turned from the fence and saw Maya trying to help lift one corner of the mattress. Her mother did not snap at her. She did not tell her she was too small. She simply said, "Hold the sheet, baby. Not the weight. Hold the sheet, not the weight." Spencer knew that sentence. Not the words exactly, but the shape of it. Ruth had spoken that way when he was a boy, turning impossible things into tasks a child could survive. Carry this spoon. Count these cans. Hold this envelope. Watch the door while I talk to the landlord. Not because the task mattered, but because dignity required children to feel useful when life was taking things from them. He was 11 the first time he saw his mother beg without sounding like she was begging. It was December, late enough that the air in the hallway felt like metal. The heat had gone out in 714B 3 nights earlier, and Ruth had boiled water on the stove just to put steam into the rooms. Spencer remembered sleeping in 2 pairs of socks, a sweatshirt, and a coat across the foot of his bed because the blanket was not enough. He remembered waking up and seeing his mother's breath in the dark. The landlord then was not some faceless corporation with a logo on a permit sign. His name was Mr. Callahan. He wore brown loafers and smelled like aftershave and cigarettes. He came to the building in the middle of the day, when most tenants were at work, because that was when it was easiest to leave notices. Ruth caught him on the stairs. Spencer had been coming home early from school because the nurse said his cough sounded bad. He stood one landing below, holding his backpack strap, listening. Ruth said, "Mr. Callahan, I paid $300 last Friday. I can pay the rest next week." Her voice was careful. Not weak. Careful. The way a person holds a glass with a crack in it. Mr. Callahan said the full balance was due by the 1st. Ruth said she understood. She said there had been a mistake with her paycheck at the laundry. She said the clinic visit cost more than she expected. She said the boy had been sick. She did not say my son. She said the boy, as if making Spencer less hers might make the request less emotional and therefore more acceptable to a man who preferred paperwork to people. Mr. Callahan looked down the stairs and saw Spencer. Their eyes met for half a second. Then he looked away as if sick children in hallways were not part of the lease. "I am not running a charity, Ruth," he said. Spencer remembered that sentence more clearly than any sermon he ever heard. He remembered the way his mother's shoulders stayed straight after it. He remembered the way she said, "Nobody asked you to." That was Ruth. She could ask for time without surrendering her spine. She could stretch 1 pound of ground beef across 3 dinners, and still set the plate in front of him like it was a choice. She could return a donated coat if the woman at church presented it like pity instead of help. Pride did not keep them warm, but Ruth never confused warmth with worth. 2 weeks after that hallway conversation, the notice came. Spencer remembered it taped to the door, white paper against chipped brown paint. The tape had been pressed down hard at the corners. Official. Final. He came home before Ruth that day and stood in front of it with his backpack still on, reading words he understood separately but not together. Possession. Premises. Failure. Vacate. He had taken the notice off the door and hidden it under his mattress. He did not know why. Children think hiding bad news slows it down. When Ruth came home at 7:40 that night, she knew anyway. Mothers can read absence as quickly as paper. She looked at the door, then at Spencer's face, then toward his bedroom. She did not yell. She sat beside him on the bed and held out her hand. He gave her the notice. She read it once. Then she folded it into a square and placed it on her lap. "Are we going to be outside?" he asked. That was all he could manage. Not homeless. Not evicted. Outside. Ruth put her arm around him and pulled him against the scratchy front of her work uniform. She smelled like detergent, steam, and the cheap hand lotion she used because the laundry chemicals cracked her skin. Not tonight, she said. Tonight we are still inside. It was not a promise about tomorrow. Ruth did not lie when the truth was coming too fast. That was the wound Spencer carried, though he had spent half his life calling it ambition. His mother had not been destroyed by one cruel person. She had been worn down by systems that always sounded reasonable. Late fee, processing time, market adjustment, medical balance, final notice. Every word clean enough to sign, cold enough to deny the body it landed on. When they finally left 714B, they did not carry a mattress. They carried 2 duffel bags, 3 grocery sacks, a shoebox of papers, and a red string around Spencer's neck holding the brass key. Ruth could not make herself return. It was ours once, she said when he asked why they were keeping it. A place can stop being yours on paper before your heart catches up. For 6 months after that, they slept wherever the world allowed them to be temporary. A cousin's living room in Queens. A church basement in Flatbush. A motel near the expressway that charged by the week and smelled like bleach over mildew. Ruth worked through all of it. She cleaned offices before sunrise, folded sheets in a hotel laundry until her wrists swelled, and took evening shifts at a diner where men called her sweetheart because they knew she had to smile for tips. Spencer did homework on bus seats, on cardboard boxes, on the floor beside vending machines. He learned which public libraries had warm bathrooms. He learned that shame had a geography. There were blocks where nobody looked at you because everybody understood, and blocks where one glance could make you feel like you had been dragged into the light without clothes. Ruth never let him skip school. Even when they had moved 3 times in a month, even when his shoes pinched because his feet had outgrown them in the middle of winter, even when breakfast was a banana cut in half and a cup of water, she sent him through the doors with his hair brushed and his collar flat. You walk in like you belong there, she would say. Because you do. Spencer believed her until he was old enough to notice the difference between belonging and being tolerated. At 13, he began staying late at school because the building was warm and because the computer lab had internet. That was where he first learned property records were public. He would type addresses into city databases and watch names appear. Owners, mortgages, tax liens, sales histories. Buildings changed hands the way children traded cards, except every trade determined whose mother got a notice on the door. He learned that Mr. Callahan had refinanced 714 Delancey twice while refusing to fix heat. He learned that the building had been sold to an investment partnership 3 months after they left. He learned that the partnership sold it again for almost double. Numbers moved upward. People moved out. No one in the records ever wrote Ruth Booker, second floor, made rice 3 ways and kept a brass key because grief needed something to hold. At 17, Spencer stopped using anger like a fire and began using it like a map. Scholarships, finance classes, real estate law, internships where men praised his hunger without asking what starvation had taught him. He wore thrift store jackets to interviews and memorized vocabulary that allowed old cruelty to return wearing new shoes. Distressed asset, underutilized parcel, tenant turnover, value creation. He hated the language and learned it better than anyone. By 28, he owned his first 6-unit building. He told himself he would be different. He fixed the boiler. He painted the hallways. He kept rents below market for the first 2 years because he still remembered his mother's breath in the cold. Then a bank called. Then a partner offered capital. Then a consultant showed him a spreadsheet proving kindness could become inefficiency if replicated at scale. He did not become cruel in one decision. That would have been easier to forgive or condemn. He became distant 1 layer at a time. He hired managers. Managers hired agents. Agents hired contractors. Contractors called tenants obstacles when they thought he could not hear. And eventually he stopped being in rooms where he might hear it. The boy who had kept an eviction notice under his mattress became a man whose company generated them by template. The key Ruth gave him stayed in a drawer for years, then in a storage box, then disappeared during a move to a penthouse where every door opened quietly, and nothing smelled like steam heat. He told himself losing it meant he had healed. Now, standing on Delancey Street, watching a little girl carry the same kind of key around her neck, Spencer understood that healing and forgetting were not the same thing. The past had not returned to comfort him. It had returned as a witness. "Sir," Curtis said again, softer this time. Spencer looked up. The woman and Maya had reached the corner. The mattress caught against a trash can and nearly folded. The woman steadied it with her shoulder, breathing hard, then checked on her daughter before checking on herself. That small order of concern broke through the memory. Ruth would have done that. Ruth had done that. "Bring the car," Spencer said. Curtis nodded and moved quickly. Spencer walked toward the corner, not fast enough to scare them, not slow enough to look uncertain. The woman heard his steps and turned before he reached her. "I said we are leaving." "I know." "Then let us leave. I can get you somewhere safe tonight." Her expression closed. A hotel room does not fix a stolen apartment. He stopped. There it was. The sentence he deserved. Not gratitude. Not relief. Accuracy. "No," he said. "It does not." She seemed surprised that he agreed. Spencer looked at the mattress, then at the folded notice in her pocket, then at Maya's small hand resting over the key beneath her shirt. "My mother lived in 714B, he said. The woman went still. For the first time since he approached her, her face lost its guarded shape and showed something like shock. "What did you say?" "Her name was Ruth Booker Voss. Before that, Ruth Booker. She lived there with me when I was a boy." Maya looked up at her mother. "Grandma Ruth." The woman's hand moved to her daughter's shoulder. "My mother was Ruth Booker." Her voice had gone thin, not weak, just stretched across too much possibility. Spencer shook his head slowly, not denying her, not accepting what neither of them understood yet. "Then there is something wrong in the records. Or there is something neither of us knows." The black car pulled to the curb. Beside them, silent and shining, absurd against the old mattress and the summer dust. The woman looked at it with suspicion, then back at him. Spencer did not open the door. He did not perform generosity. He stood on the sidewalk with his hands visible and his voice low. "I am not asking you to trust me. I have not earned that. I am asking for one chance to find out why your mother's key matches my mother's door, and why my company says you declined help you never received." The woman looked down the street toward the church they had been walking to. Then she looked at Maya, whose face was tired in the way children should not be tired, not sleepy but aware. Finally she looked at Spencer. "My name is Naomi Reed," she said. "My daughter's name is Maya. And if you lie to us, I will know." Spencer believed her. More than that, he respected the warning. It sounded like Ruth. It sounded like every woman who had survived systems designed to make her doubt her own memory. "Then do not let me forget what I saw today," he said. Naomi did not answer. But she did not pick up the mattress again. And for Spencer, that was not forgiveness. It was only a pause. Sometimes a life changes not when someone opens a door, but when someone finally stops long enough to admit who locked it. Naomi did not get into the car because she trusted Spencer. She got in because Maya's knees had started to bend the way tired children try to hide until their bodies tell the truth. Curtis opened the back door, then stepped away as if the space belonged to Naomi to decide. That mattered. Men with money often open doors like they were granting access to their world. Curtis opened it like he was making sure nobody touched her things. The mattress would not fit in the trunk. It would not fit across the back seat. For a moment, Naomi looked at it with the kind of quiet defeat that comes when even an object becomes too large for the help offered. Then Curtis folded the rear seats, removed 2 garment bags and a polished leather briefcase worth more than the mattress, and slid the mattress in carefully, sheet and all. Spencer watched his own driver solve in 30 seconds. What he had been standing beside with billions of dollars and no useful instinct. Maya climbed in first, holding the black trash bag on her lap. Naomi sat beside her, not leaning back, not relaxing, one hand on the door handle, the other over the pocket where the notice rested. Spencer sat in the front passenger seat. It was the first time in years he had sat anywhere but the back. Curtis noticed. He said nothing. The car pulled away from Delancey Street, and for 4 blocks no one spoke. The air conditioning was too cold. Spencer reached forward and turned it down without asking. Naomi saw the movement. A small thing, almost nothing. But when you have spent months in offices where people speak to you through glass partitions and never ask if you have bus fare home, small things become evidence. Where are we going? She asked. The Meridian on State Street, Spencer said. It has extended stay rooms with kitchens. It is clean. It is close to the school district. Naomi turned her head. How do you know what school district my child is in? Spencer caught the mistake as soon as she said it. Rich men call research preparation. Poor mothers call it being watched. I do not, he said. I meant the neighborhood. I should not have assumed. You keep assuming. I know. Maya looked at him through the gap between the seats. Is it a hotel with tiny soaps? Naomi's hand tightened around hers. Spencer answered carefully, not smiling too much, not trying to buy the child with charm. Yes. It has tiny soaps. Maya considered this. Do we have to give them back? No, Spencer said. They are yours. The first almost smile appeared on Maya's face and disappeared quickly, as if she did not want to betray her mother's caution. 10 minutes later, Spencer's phone began vibrating. He looked down. Lydia Grant, General Counsel. Then Everett Shaw, Chief Operating Officer. Then Marla from Public Affairs. The calls came one after another, too fast to be ordinary. Spencer ignored the first two. On the third he answered. Not now. Lydia did not wait for permission to speak. Spencer, where are you? In the car. We have a situation at Delancey. His eyes moved to the side mirror, where the neighborhood was already behind them. What kind of situation? A tenant posted a video. Naomi looked up. She had not moved, but the word tenant reached her like a hand tapping a bruise. Lydia continued. A woman with a child. Mattress. Your fence sign is visible. Someone filmed you speaking with her. It is on 3 neighborhood pages already, and a housing rights account picked it up. The comments are turning. Spencer closed his eyes. Not because of reputation, because he could already hear how the room would translate Naomi into risk. Do not issue a statement. We need to get ahead of it. I said do not issue a statement. Lydia paused. Everett is in the office. He says this may be connected to an unauthorized occupant from the Phase 2 clearance list. The relocation file shows refusal of assistance. We have documentation. Naomi let out one short breath. Not a laugh. Not a gasp. The sound of someone hearing the lie put on a suit. Spencer turned slightly, but not fully toward her. That documentation may be false. Lydia's voice changed. That is a serious allegation. Yes. Against our own team? Against our own process. Another pause. Longer. Spencer, listen to me carefully. If you are with this woman, do not make promises. Do not admit fault. Do not hand her money directly. Do not put anything in writing. We need to control the narrative. Naomi looked out the window then. The city slid across her face in pieces of light and shadow. Spencer could feel the space between what Lydia was saying and what Ruth would have heard. Control the narrative. The modern version of I am not running a charity. The narrative is that a mother was displaced and our file says she refused help she never received, Spencer said. That is not a narrative. That is a fact until proven otherwise. Lydia lowered her voice. Facts are what survive review. Then start reviewing. He ended the call. The silence afterward had weight. Naomi did not thank him. That made him trust her more. They are going to say I did something wrong, she said. Spencer looked forward. They are going to try. Not try. They will. People like that always have a folder. She reached into the trash bag on Maya's lap and pulled out a bent manila envelope secured with a rubber band. The envelope had been handled so much the corners had softened. She removed 3 papers and held them against her knee. This is the first letter. This is the second one. This is the paper from the office on Atlantic Avenue where the woman told me I was not on the relocation list because my name was spelled wrong in the system. This is the receipt for the certified letter I sent back. Nobody signed for it. It came back to me after 18 days. Spencer stared at the papers. Not because they were surprising but because they were organized. Poor people are often treated as if their lives are messy because their character is messy. But Naomi's papers were dated, clipped, folded by category. She had built a legal defense inside a trash bag while carrying a mattress down the street. "You kept everything," he said. "Of course I kept everything." There was the first flash of anger. Controlled, clean, deserved. When you are poor, paper is the only witness people sometimes believe. Curtis looked at her in the mirror, and something like respect passed quietly across his face. The car turned onto State Street. The Meridian rose ahead, all glass doors and brass planters, the kind of place where the lobby smelled like lemon water and fresh flowers. Naomi's body changed before they reached the curb. She sat straighter. She wiped Maya's cheek with her thumb. She tucked loose hair behind her daughter's ear. Not vanity. Armor. Spencer had seen executives prepare for boardrooms with less focus. Curtis unloaded the mattress at the side entrance to avoid the lobby, but the side entrance required a manager's key. The front desk clerk, a young man in a navy blazer, came out with a tablet and the polite suspicion hotels reserve for problems they hope will leave. His eyes moved from Spencer to Naomi, then to the mattress, then to the trash bag, then back to Spencer when he realized which person could make trouble for him. "Good evening, Mr. Voss. We were not expecting you." "They need a room," Spencer said. "Extended stay. Kitchen. 2 beds if available." The clerk tapped the tablet. "Absolutely. I will just need identification and a credit card." Naomi opened her purse. Spencer had already pulled out his card, but she spoke first. "I have identification." The clerk smiled without warmth. "And a card for incidentals." Naomi stopped. She had $37, a bus card, a library card, and a debit card that would decline if held for more than $40. Spencer placed his black card on the desk. "Use mine." Naomi turned to him. "No." The clerk froze. Spencer did too. "Naomi," he said softly, "it is only a hold. It is never only anything when your name is not the one paying." She looked at the clerk. "Can you put the room in my name with his card attached?" The clerk glanced at Spencer, unsure whom to obey. Spencer said, "Do exactly that." The clerk's fingers moved faster. That was when Everett Shaw arrived. Spencer heard his voice before he saw him. "There you are." Everett came through the revolving doors in a gray suit that looked relaxed on purpose, public relations casual, crisis expensive. He was 52, smooth-faced, silver-haired, with a kind of smile that had closed more tenants' mouths than lawsuits ever could. Behind him walked Lydia Grant, holding a slim folder against her chest. Naomi saw the folder and went still. Maya moved closer to her mother. Everett took in the lobby with one sweep, the mattress near the sidewall, the child with the trash bag, Naomi's worn shoes, Spencer standing at the desk. His expression did not change, but Spencer knew him well enough to see the calculation begin. "Miss Reed," Everett said, as if they had met before. Naomi's eyes narrowed. "You know my name. We have been reviewing the file." He said file the way a doctor says condition. Something that exists but not as a person. "There appears to be some confusion about your occupancy status." "There is no confusion," Naomi said. "I lived there." Lydia stepped forward, voice even. "The unit in question was registered to a Ruth Booker, deceased, with no approved succession claim on record. Our outreach team documented multiple attempts to contact any remaining occupants. The final entry states that relocation services were declined." Naomi reached into her envelope again. "That is a lie." Everett's smile faded half an inch. "I understand this is emotional." Spencer felt the old stairwell return. Mr. Callahan in brown loafers. "I'm not running a charity." Same song, cleaner room. "Do not talk to her like that," Spencer said. Everett turned toward him. "I am trying to protect the company." "From what?" "The truth. From exposure based on an incomplete picture." Lydia opened the folder. "Spencer, there is more. The social media clip has reached local reporters. If Miss Reed accepts lodging from you tonight, plaintiff's attorneys could frame it as an admission of wrongdoing. The board will ask whether you use company funds or personal funds. Investors will ask whether Delancey Phase 2 is compromised. The City Housing Committee already has us on the calendar next month for incentives review." Naomi listened to every word. Something changed in her face. Not fear. Recognition. The fight had expanded. It was no longer a door, a key, a mattress, a hotel room. It was committees, investors, calendars, statements, rooms where men and women in clean clothes would discuss whether her suffering created financial exposure. Maya whispered, "Mama, are we in trouble?" Naomi knelt immediately, right there on the polished hotel floor. "No, baby. We are not in trouble for telling the truth." Spencer watched people in the lobby glance over, then look away. That was the moment the conflict became visible. Not loud, not violent. Just a mother kneeling in front of a child beside a luxury hotel desk, while executives debated liability over her head. Everett lowered his voice. "Spencer, step aside with me." "No. This is not the place." "This is exactly the place. The whole problem is that we keep choosing places where people like Naomi are not in the room." Everett's jaw tightened. "You are emotional because of the address." Naomi looked up. "What does that mean?" Everett realized his mistake a second too late. Spencer turned to him slowly. "What do you know about the address?" Lydia closed the folder. Everett did not answer quickly enough. In business, hesitation is often more revealing than confession. Naomi stood. "What is in that file?" Lydia held it tighter. Spencer extended his hand. "Give it to me." "I cannot," Lydia said. "Counsel privilege. I own the company. And I am telling you as counsel, not here." The hotel clerk had stopped pretending to type. Curtis stood by the mattress with his hands folded, watching Everett like a man memorizing details. Spencer looked at Naomi's envelope, then at Lydia's folder. 2 sets of paper. One carried in a trash bag. One carried by an attorney. One full of receipts nobody answered. One full of notes nobody wanted seen. Outside the glass doors, a news van slowed near the curb, its side logo catching the lobby lights. Everett saw it. Lydia saw it. Naomi saw it last. Her face did not break, but Spencer saw her hand find Maya's shoulder again. The system had arrived faster than mercy. Spencer took his card from the desk and placed it back down with deliberate calm. "Check them in," Lydia whispered. "Spencer." He did not look at her. "Check them in now." The clerk processed the room. Everett stepped closer, voice barely above breath. "If you do this, you are choosing one disputed claimant over $100 million development." Spencer looked at Naomi, at Maya, at the mattress leaning against a marble wall like an accusation nobody could decorate away. Then he looked at Everett. "No," he said. "I am choosing to find out why you are so afraid of a woman with receipts." The room they gave Naomi and Maya was on the 7th floor, facing the back of the hotel where delivery trucks came and went beneath a row of security lights. It had 2 queen beds, a small kitchen, a table with 2 chairs, and a bathroom so clean that Maya stood at the doorway and whispered, "Mama, the towels are folded like flowers." Naomi did not smile until she checked the window lock, the door chain, the closet, and under both beds. Spencer stood in the hallway with the mattress leaned against the wall, waiting because he understood now that safety was not a place you entered just because someone paid for it. Safety had to be inspected. Curtis carried the mattress inside only after Naomi nodded. He placed it against the far wall with the care of a man setting down something fragile. Maya put the black trash bag beside the chair and immediately opened it, pulling out pajamas, a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye, a toothbrush in a sandwich bag, and the manila envelope of papers. Naomi took the envelope and laid it on the table before she touched anything else. That was when Spencer saw the test begin. Not from Everett. Not from Lydia. From Naomi herself. A poor woman in a hotel room paid for by a billionaire had to decide how much of her dignity could survive the help she needed. Spencer placed a room key on the table and stepped back. "This is yours. Curtis will stay downstairs tonight if you need anything. Food can be sent up." Naomi looked at the key, then at him. "Do not send up room service." Spencer stopped. "Maya has not eaten." "Maya will eat. But she will not sit in a room waiting for strangers to bring silver-covered plates because a man with guilt decided hunger is easier to fix than truth." The words were calm. That made them sharper. Maya looked from her mother to Spencer, not frightened, just listening. Children learn the rules of dignity by watching how adults accept help. Spencer nodded once. "What do you need?" Naomi opened her purse and took out the $37, the bus card, the library card, and her debit card. She placed them on the table beside the hotel key. There is a grocery store 2 blocks over. I saw it from the car. Maya and I can buy bread, turkey slices, apples, milk, and cereal. If you want to help tonight, you can have Curtis take us there and bring us back. I will pay for our food. Spencer looked at the $37. In his world, that amount disappeared into tips, parking, a bottle of water from an airport lounge. On this table it had weight. Naomi, he said softly, you do not have to spend your last money to prove something. She looked him straight in the eye. I am not proving anything. I am teaching my daughter that help is not the same as ownership. That sentence settled into the room and stayed there. Spencer had no answer because the right answer was obedience. He turned to Curtis. Take them wherever they want to go. Curtis nodded. Yes, sir. Naomi picked up the room key, then pushed it gently toward Maya. Hold this for us. Maya took it with both hands, serious as a banker accepting a vault code. Before they could leave, Spencer's phone buzzed again. This time it was not Lydia. It was Everett. Spencer ignored it. Then a text appeared. Board emergency call in 15 minutes. Do not let claimant speak to media. Spencer looked at the words long enough for Naomi to notice. They are still calling me claimant, she asked. He did not ask how she knew. Yes. She put Maya's sweater over her shoulders. Then let them. The grocery store was small, bright, and overpriced because it served hotels more than residents. Spencer did not go inside. Naomi did not want him there. And for once he had enough sense not to mistake presence for support. He stayed near the entrance with Curtis while Naomi and Maya walked the aisles with a plastic basket. Through the window, Spencer watched Maya point to a box of cereal with cartoon marshmallows. Naomi checked the price, then reached for the store brand on the lower shelf. Maya did not complain. She simply nodded, as if she had expected the math to decide. Naomi added wheat bread, a half-gallon of milk, turkey slices, bananas instead of apples because bananas were cheaper by the pound, and a small jar of peanut butter. At the register, she counted bills carefully. The cashier asked if she wanted a bag. 10 cents each. Naomi paused for a fraction of a second before saying, "One is fine." Spencer looked away. Not because the moment was too small, because it was too large. A human being should not have to calculate dignity at 10 cents a bag. When they returned to the hotel, the lobby had changed. A local reporter stood near the revolving doors with a camera operator, speaking quietly to the front desk clerk. Lydia was beside a column, arms crossed, watching the elevators. Everett was gone, which meant he was somewhere more dangerous, on the phone with people who could turn cruelty into strategy. Naomi saw the reporter and stopped. Maya pressed closer to her side. The reporter turned. "Miss Reed? Naomi Reed? I am Carla Benson with Channel 6. Do you have a minute to talk about what happened on Delancey Street?" Lydia moved quickly. "Miss Reed has no comment." Naomi looked at Lydia. "I can speak for myself." Lydia's face tightened. "Anything you say could complicate your situation." Naomi held the grocery bag against her hip. The milk was heavy. The plastic stretched white around her fingers. Spencer saw the choice in her eyes. A camera meant danger, but it also meant a kind of power she had been denied in offices and on paper. A wrong sentence could make her look ungrateful. A desperate sentence could make her look unstable. A bitter sentence could make people stop hearing the facts. This was the moral test, and no one in the lobby except Naomi had to pay the full price of failing it. Carla Benson lowered her microphone slightly. To her credit, her voice softened. "You do not have to answer anything you do not want to." Naomi looked down at Maya. "Go stand with Mr. Curtis for 1 minute, baby." Maya hesitated. Naomi touched her cheek. "I am right here." Curtis stepped closer, not touching the child, only making himself available. Maya walked to him with the room key in her hand and the seriousness of someone guarding a whole life upstairs. Naomi turned back to the reporter. "I will say one thing." Lydia started. "Miss Reed, I strongly advise against." Spencer spoke over her. "Let her speak." Lydia looked at him with disbelief. Naomi did not thank him. She did not need permission. She faced the camera. The lobby lights reflected in her tired eyes. Her hair had loosened from the heat and the long day. Her shoes were dusty from Delancey Street. One hand held a grocery bag. The other rested over the pocket with the papers. My daughter and I are not a public relations problem, Naomi said. We are not a mistake in a file. We are not a rumor online. We lived in a home connected to my mother, Ruth Booker. We received papers we tried to answer. We went to offices where nobody would listen. Today, I carried a mattress because I did not know where my child would sleep tonight. That is the truth. But I am not here to ask strangers to hate anyone for me. I am asking the people with power to stop hiding behind paperwork and open the records. If I am wrong, prove it. If they are wrong, fix it. Not just for me. For every family who got turned into a checked box before somebody took their door away. The reporter did not interrupt. No one did. Even Lydia stayed silent. Naomi's voice did not rise. She did not cry. That was what made it impossible to dismiss. She stood there with $37 reduced to a few bills, groceries in a plastic bag, and a child watching from beside the elevator, and she asked not for revenge, not for pity, but for proof. Spencer felt something shift in the lobby. People who had been pretending not to listen were listening now. A man in a suit near the bar lowered his phone. The front desk clerk stopped typing. Curtis looked at the floor for a moment, jaw tight. Carla Benson asked, "Do you believe Mr. Voss is responsible?" Naomi turned her head toward Spencer. The question could have destroyed him. It could also have freed her from having to carry nuance for a man whose company had hurt her. Spencer did not move. Naomi looked back at the camera. Responsibility is not only about what a man signs. It is about what he does after he sees the damage. Spencer felt the sentence enter him like a judgment and a chance at the same time. Lydia exhaled slowly, already calculating headlines. Naomi took Maya's hand and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. Before stepping inside, Maya turned to Spencer. "Are you going to open the records?" The question came from a child, but it landed harder than anything the board could ask. Spencer looked at the room key in her hand, the red string at her neck, and the old brass key hidden beneath her shirt. "Yes," he said. "All of them." Upstairs, Naomi made sandwiches at the small kitchen counter. She cut Maya's sandwich diagonally because Maya said triangles tasted better. Spencer remained downstairs. He did not go to the board call from his car. He did not let Lydia stand beside him and translate his conscience into acceptable language. He stood in the hotel business center, under fluorescent lights, and joined the call alone. 12 faces appeared on the screen. Investors. Board members. Everett in the corner. Looking composed. Before anyone could speak, Spencer said, "Effective immediately, Delancey Phase 2 is paused. All tenant relocation files from the last 36 months will be audited by an outside legal aid group. Not our counsel, not our consultants. Any family falsely marked as declined assistance will receive restitution, housing support, and a written correction. Everett, you will preserve every record by midnight." Everett's face did not change, but his eyes did. That is an extreme reaction to one media clip. Spencer looked at him through the screen. No. It is a minimum reaction to one woman with receipts. A board member began talking about exposure. Another mentioned investor confidence. Someone set precedent. Someone set cost. Spencer listened to the language gather itself around the same old emptiness. Then he thought of Naomi in the grocery aisle choosing bananas by the pound, of Ruth folding an eviction notice into a square, of Maya asking if tiny soaps had to be returned. "You can discuss costs without me," Spencer said. "I already know the price of looking away." He ended the call before they could answer. For the first time all day, the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt like a door beginning to unlock. The audit began at 8:06 the next morning, not in a boardroom, but in a borrowed conference room on the second floor of the Meridian Hotel because Naomi refused to ride downtown to Spencer's office where every wall had his name hidden in the architecture. She said truth should not have to walk into the house of the person who misplaced it. Spencer did not argue. By 8:30, the room held 2 legal aid attorneys from Brooklyn Housing Justice, 1 city housing investigator, Lydia Grant with 3 sealed boxes of company files, Curtis standing near the door with coffee nobody had asked for, and Naomi sitting at the far end of the table with Maya beside her coloring quietly on hotel stationery. The mattress was upstairs now. The trash bag was upstairs. But the manila envelope sat in front of Naomi like a second heartbeat. She had placed it carefully on the table, rubber band still around it, as if waiting to see whether the room deserved what was inside. Spencer sat across from her, not at the head of the table. The head of the table remained empty. It bothered Lydia. Spencer could tell because she kept glancing at it, the way people trained by hierarchy look at empty power and want someone to occupy it. Everett Shaw arrived at 8:47. He was 13 minutes late and clean in the way guilty men sometimes become when they believe grooming can pass for calm. Navy suit, silver tie, small leather notebook. He greeted the investigator by name and nodded to the legal aid attorneys as if they were vendors. When he saw Naomi, he softened his face. "Miss Reed, I hope you and your daughter were comfortable last night." Naomi did not answer. Maya did not look up from her drawing. Spencer watched Everett notice the silence and file it away. "Let us begin," the investigator said. Her name was Denise Alvarez, and she had the voice of a woman who had spent 20 years reading documents people hoped she would skim. Lydia opened the first box. "These are the relocation records for Delancey Phase 2, including outreach logs, refusal forms, certified mail receipts, and property management notes." One legal aid attorney, Priya Shah, put on reading glasses. "And digital records?" Lydia hesitated. "Being exported." Denise looked up. "That was requested for this morning." Everett stepped in smoothly. "The volume is significant. We wanted to ensure chain of custody." Priya did not blink. Chain of custody usually starts before public exposure. The room went quiet for half a second. Spencer almost admired her for saying what he had been too polite to say. They began with Naomi's file. That was the agreement. Not because her suffering mattered more than anyone else's, but because her papers had forced the door open. Lydia placed a folder on the table. Typed label. Re Naomi. Unit 714B. Spencer felt the number before he read it. Naomi leaned forward slightly. Maya's crayon stopped moving. Denise opened the folder. The first page listed Ruth Booker as deceased primary tenant. The second listed Naomi Reed as unauthorized occupant. The third listed outreach attempts. Phone call, no answer. Door knock, no answer. Letter mailed. Final notice posted. Relocation assistance declined. Signature on refusal form. Denise turned the paper toward Naomi. "Is this your signature?" Naomi looked at it once. "No." Spencer looked too. The signature said Naomi Reed, but it was wrong in the small places only a life would know. The N too sharp. The R looped. Naomi's real signature, on the certified mail receipt she pulled from her envelope, moved lower, wider, like a person writing on a kitchen counter while holding a child's backpack with one elbow. Priya placed both signatures side by side. "These are not the same." Everett leaned back. "People sign differently under stress." Naomi's eyes lifted to him. "I did not sign differently. I did not sign at all." Denise looked at Lydia. "Who witnessed the refusal?" Lydia checked the file. "Property manager. Jonas Bell." "Where is Mr. Bell?" Everett answered too quickly. "No longer with the company." Priya made a note. "When did he leave?" Lydia turned a page. 3 weeks ago. Spencer looked at Everett. "Why did Jonas leave?" Everett opened his notebook. Performance restructuring. There were concerns about documentation delays. Spencer held his gaze. Documentation delays or documentation fraud? "Careful," Everett said softly. The word landed like a warning wrapped in velvet. Denise turned the next page and stopped. "There is a supplemental note." She read silently for several seconds. The room changed before she spoke. Spencer could feel it. Paper has a way of making truth arrive before language does. Denise said, "This note says occupant presented legacy claim through Ruth Booker family connection, but claim was rejected because relationship could not be verified." Naomi sat back slowly. "I brought my birth certificate." Lydia searched the folder. "It is not here." Naomi opened her envelope and removed a folded copy protected inside a plastic sleeve. "Because they would not take it. The woman at the office said copies were not enough. I asked where to bring the original. She said there was no point because the system had already closed the unit." She slid the paper across the table. Denise read it. Mother Ruth Elaine Booker. Child, Naomi Denise Booker. Later amended by marriage record to Naomi Reed. Spencer stared at the name. Ruth Elaine Booker. His mother's name had been Ruth Elaine Booker too. Not similar. Except the same middle name. The same handwriting across different decades of documents. He heard the room continue around him, but something inside him stepped backward into childhood. Ruth at the kitchen table. Ruth licking an envelope. Ruth saying some family stories are not finished just because people stop telling them. He had never asked enough questions. Children do not ask about the pain their parents fold away. Adults inherit silence and mistake it for privacy. Denise placed Naomi's birth certificate beside the company file. This should have triggered additional review. Priya nodded. At minimum. Everett cleared his throat. Unless the Ruth Booker listed in the legacy documents is a different individual. Booker is not an uncommon name. Naomi looked at him like she had been waiting for the insult to become visible. You think I carried my mother's key around for fun? Maya spoke then, small but clear. It was in Grandma Ruth's cookie tin. Everyone turned. Naomi touched her daughter's wrist gently, but Maya kept going. The blue tin. With the birds on top. Mama keeps papers in it. Spencer's heart moved so sharply it almost hurt. Blue tin. Naomi looked at him. Yes. Spencer swallowed. My mother had one. Danish butter cookies. She kept rent receipts and photographs in it. Naomi's expression shifted. Not soft. Not yet. But shaken. A lot of people had those tins. Did yours have tape on the bottom? Spencer asked. Brown tape because one corner rusted through? Naomi said nothing. Her face answered first. Maya looked between them, confused by the power of a cookie tin. Naomi reached into the manila envelope and removed a small stack of photographs held together with an old rubber band. These were in it. She did not hand them to Spencer. She handed them to Denise, who placed them in the center where everyone could see. The first photograph showed Ruth younger, standing on a fire escape in a yellow blouse, holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. On the back, written in blue ink, was Naomi, 3 months 714B. The second photograph showed Ruth years later, hair shorter, face thinner, standing beside a boy on a stoop. Spencer stopped breathing. The boy was him. 12 years old maybe. Skinny shoulders. Serious eyes. A school shirt buttoned to the throat. Ruth's hand rested on his shoulder. On the back, in the same blue ink, it said Spencer before the move. Naomi leaned forward, and for the first time since he had met her, her guarded expression broke open into something like disbelief. Why does my mother have your picture? Spencer could not answer. He reached into his wallet with fingers that did not feel like his own. Behind credit cards, behind his license, behind a folded emergency contact card Curtis had made him carry after a health scare, was a photograph he had kept so long he no longer remembered choosing to keep it. Ruth sitting at a kitchen table, older than in Naomi's baby picture, holding a little girl on her lap. Spencer had always assumed the child was a neighbor's daughter. Someone his mother babysat. Someone passing through. On the back there was no name. Only one sentence. Forgive me for the years I could not explain. He slid it across the table. Naomi looked at the picture and covered her mouth with one hand. Maya stood on the chair to see better. That is Mama, she said. Naomi whispered. That is me. The room became very still. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just the kind of silence that happens when paperwork fails and blood, memory, and consequence enter without asking permission. Spencer looked at Naomi, at the photograph, at Ruth's handwriting. I did not know, he said. It sounded useless the moment it left his mouth. Of course he did not know. Not knowing had been the shape of his entire life. Naomi's eyes were wet now, but she did not let tears fall. What was she to you? Spencer answered with the only truth he had. My mother. Naomi shook her head once. She was my mother. Denise looked from one to the other. There may have been an informal adoption, kinship placement, or sealed family arrangement. We need vital records. Priya turned to Naomi. Were you raised by Ruth? From birth. Naomi took a breath that trembled at the edges. No. My grandmother raised me until I was 7. Then Ruth came for me. She said she was my mother. She never explained why she had been gone. I was angry for years. Then I had Maya, and I stopped needing every answer before I accepted the love she gave me. Spencer closed his eyes. Ruth had left 714B with him when he was 13. Naomi would have been a child then. Somewhere else under someone else's roof, waiting for a mother Spencer never knew he was sharing. The wound was larger than eviction now. Larger than one forged form. Ruth had carried 2 children through a life that never gave her enough money, enough time, or enough mercy to explain them to each other. Everett was the first to move. He reached toward the company file. This is all very compelling, but family history does not change the legal status of the unit. Curtis stepped forward half a pace. Spencer lifted a hand and Curtis stopped. Naomi's face closed again. Not because Everett had surprised her. Because he had reminded her that systems can watch a miracle happen and still ask for a notarized copy. Denise turned another page. Actually, it may change the legal status significantly. If Naomi Reed had a succession or legacy occupancy claim tied to Ruth Booker, and if your team suppressed or failed to process that claim, the clearance may have violated city relocation requirements. Priya added, and if the refusal signature was forged, that becomes more than a housing dispute. Lydia's face had gone pale. Spencer watched Everett now, not as an employee, not as a trusted executive, but as a man who had spent years standing between truth and consequence. Open the digital records, Spencer said. Lydia whispered. They are not ready. Now. Everett smiled faintly. Spencer, do not let emotion turn this into a spectacle. Spencer stood. I said open them. The city investigator placed her laptop on the table. I have subpoena authority pending if voluntary access becomes difficult. Lydia looked at Everett. Everett did not look back. That was when Spencer understood. Lydia knew there was a problem. Everett knew where it was buried. 10 minutes later, a digital archive appeared on the conference room screen. Emails, scan logs, call notes. The legal aid attorney searched Naomi Reed. Nothing at first. Then Ruth Booker. Then 714B. One email appeared from Jonas Bell to Everett Shaw, dated 6 months earlier. Subject line. Legacy claim issue. Priya opened it. The message was short. Occupant claims daughter status through Ruth Booker. Has birth certificate in old key. If accepted, relocation payment and replacement housing required. Phase 2 demo schedule affected. Please advise. Everett's reply sat beneath it. Do not process until after clearance deadline. Mark is unverified. If no attorney appears, close as declined. No one spoke. Even the air conditioning seemed to recede. Naomi stared at the screen. Spencer stared at Everett. Everett stared at nothing. The truth did not arrive with thunder. It arrived in 12 words typed by a man who had probably been drinking coffee when he wrote them. Mark is unverified. Close as declined. 12 words and Naomi lost a home. 12 words and Maya slept in uncertainty. 12 words and Spencer's company became the same door his mother once stood outside. Lydia closed her eyes. Denise took a photograph of the screen. Priya whispered, "Preserve that." Spencer turned to Everett. "You knew." Everett's mask finally slipped, not into remorse but irritation. "I knew we had a vulnerable schedule. I knew one disputed claim could delay a project employing hundreds of people. I knew the city incentives had deadlines. I made a business decision." Naomi stood slowly. Maya reached for her hand. "My child was not a business decision." Everett did not look at Maya. That told Spencer more than any confession. Spencer walked to the head of the table at last, not to claim power, but to place it where everyone could see what it was for. He picked up the printed refusal form with Naomi's false signature and laid it beside Ruth's photograph. Then he placed his palm on both. No more. Everett's eyes narrowed. You need to think carefully about what happens next. Spencer looked at the screen, at the email, at the woman who might be his sister by blood or by Ruth's love, and at the child wearing the key to the door both families had lost. "I am thinking carefully," he said. For the first time in years. He turned to Denise Alvarez. "You have full access. Every file. Every email. Every payment. Every clearance deadline. If there are families we erased on paper, we find them. If money is owed, we pay it. If homes were taken unlawfully, We repair it in public. Everett laughed once quietly. You will destroy the company. Spencer looked at Naomi. She was still standing, still holding her daughter's hand, still not asking him for anything. Then he looked back at Everett. No. You confused the company with the lie that protected it. I am destroying that. Maya touched the brass key beneath her shirt and asked, Does this mean we can go home? No one answered immediately because the building was gone, and children deserve better than pretty lies over empty gravel. Naomi knelt beside her. It means they have to tell the truth about what happened to it. Spencer crouched too, keeping distance, meeting Maya's eyes. And it means I am going to build back more than a door. Naomi looked at him then, cautious even through shock. Do not promise my daughter something you can only say in a room full of witnesses. Spencer nodded. Then I will put it in writing. He turned to Lydia. Draft it before noon. Naomi Reed and Maya Reed receive immediate permanent housing, full relocation restitution, independent counsel paid by the company but chosen by them, and first right to return to any housing built on Delancey. Every displaced family in Phase 2 gets the same review. Not charity. Correction. Naomi looked at Ruth's photographs on the table. Her voice was low. My mother kept your picture. Spencer picked up the photograph of his younger self but did not take it. She kept yours too. For a moment the documents, the emails, the forged form, the hotel conference room, the billion-dollar project, all of it fell behind the image of one woman with too little money and too many secrets, saving photographs in a cookie tin because someday maybe the children she loved would need proof that they had not been strangers. Spencer had built towers trying to escape a locked door. Naomi had carried a mattress back to the place where that door once stood. And between them, on a table under hotel lights, Ruth Booker had finally opened it. By the next morning, the building on Delancey Street no longer looked like a place waiting to swallow another family. It looked like a place that had finally been forced to answer for what it had done. Spencer Booker Voss stood in the lobby at 7:12 a.m., not in his car, not behind glass, not on a call, but on the cracked tile floor where tenants had been walking for years with letters in their hands and fear in their stomachs. The same lobby he had once run through as a boy now held a folding table, 3 legal aid attorneys, 2 housing inspectors, a city compliance officer, and a stack of files thick enough to make his chief operating officer go pale. The old radiator hissed against the wall. A child's scooter leaned beside the mailboxes. Someone had taped a handwritten sign above the table that said, Tenant review today. No one will be removed without counsel. Spencer had written the last sentence himself because he needed the people in that building to understand that this was not a photo opportunity, not a donation, not another rich man stepping into a poor neighborhood for one emotional afternoon and leaving before the elevators broke again. This was a reversal with paper behind it. This was money moving in the opposite direction. This was the beginning of repair. By 8 a.m. the first families came downstairs slowly, suspiciously, carrying folders, envelopes, rent receipts, hospital bills, pay stubs, eviction notices, and the quiet exhaustion of people who had been asked to prove their humanity too many times. They did not clap when Spencer spoke. They did not thank him. Some would not even look at him, and he understood that. Gratitude would have been too easy for him. Anger was more honest. A woman from the 3rd floor placed a plastic grocery bag full of receipts on the table and said her rent had gone up twice in 11 months. A retired bus driver from the 2nd floor said maintenance had ignored his mold complaint since February. Young father showed pictures of a ceiling leak above his baby's crib. One by one, the stories stopped being stories and became evidence. Spencer listened to every word. He did not interrupt. He did not defend the company. He did not say he had not known. That sentence had died in him the night before. Not knowing was not innocence when your name was on the deed. Not knowing was a luxury purchased by distance. Across the lobby, Mariah stood near the stairs with Nia beside her, holding the small stuffed rabbit she had carried from the storage unit. Mariah's hands were folded in front of her, but her shoulders were not lowered anymore. She was not waiting to be rescued. She was waiting to see whether the man who had helped uncover the truth would have the courage to stay after the truth became inconvenient. Spencer saw her watching him, and for the first time since he was a boy on this block, he felt smaller in the right way. At 9:36 a.m., his attorney arrived with the emergency injunction. The scheduled removals were frozen. Every pending eviction tied to improper notices, inflated fees, or ignored repair requests would be reviewed. The building's management contract was terminated effective immediately. The shell company that had been used to hide ownership transfers would be dissolved. Relocation assistance would be paid to every tenant forced out under the previous pressure campaign. Not as charity, but as restitution. When Spencer signed the first page, the pen felt heavier than any acquisition agreement he had ever signed. When he signed the last page, Mariah looked down at Nia and whispered, "That means people get to stay." Nia looked around the lobby at the adults holding folders and children holding breakfast bars and old men sitting on the stairs because there were not enough chairs. "All of them?" she asked. Mariah did not answer right away because hope was still a dangerous word in her mouth. Spencer heard the question. He stepped forward, stopped several feet away, and lowered his voice so it would not sound like an announcement. "As many as the law allows," he said. "And where the law does not reach, I will." It was not a perfect answer, but it was the first honest one. Later that afternoon, the mattress was carried back inside, not dragged along the sidewalk, not balanced against Mariah's shoulder, not treated like proof of failure. 2 maintenance workers carried it up the stairs while Nia walked behind them with the rabbit tucked under her chin. The apartment was still small. The paint still peeled near the window. The kitchen light still flickered once before staying on. But the lock had been changed. The eviction notice had been removed, and on the counter sat a written agreement that gave Mariah time, protection, and legal standing. She stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping in. People think justice always looks like a courtroom or a check with many zeros. Sometimes justice looks like a child putting her shoes under the same bed 2 nights in a row. Sometimes it looks like a mother opening a refrigerator without pretending the emptiness is part of a game. Sometimes it looks like a powerful man standing in a lobby while people tell him exactly how his company hurt them, and choosing not to look away. Spencer did not ask Mariah to forgive him. He knew forgiveness could not be negotiated like a contract. Instead, he gave her the one thing poor people are almost never given when rich people make mistakes. He gave her proof. By sunset, every tenant had a direct number to legal aid, every repair order had been logged, and every fee added in the last year was under audit. The building was not healed. A building does not heal in one day. A family does not stop being afraid because one man finally feels ashamed. But something had shifted. The machinery that had been moving silently against them had stopped. And in that silence, for the first time in months, Mariah heard Nia laugh from the bedroom. Not a careful laugh. Not a laugh made small so it would not bother anyone. A real laugh, bright and sudden, bouncing against the walls of a home they had almost lost. Spencer stood in the hallway with his hand resting against the old banister, listening. He had spent 22 years proving he could become bigger than this block. Now he understood that the harder work was becoming worthy of returning to it. 3 months later, on a cold Saturday morning in November, the same sidewalk on Delancey Street held a different kind of weight. Not a mattress. Not a trash bag. Not a mother trying to carry a whole life by herself. This time it held folding chairs, paper cups of coffee, a table covered with donated winter coats, and a line of tenants waiting to sign up for the new community repair fund. The building still had its scars. The brick was still weathered. The front steps still dipped slightly in the middle from decades of shoes and rain and people coming home tired. But the fear that used to sit in the hallway like a second landlord was gone. In its place was something quieter and harder to name. It was not happiness exactly. Happiness was too simple a word for people who had survived too much. It was safety, and safety changes the sound of a place. Children ran down the stairs without being told to stay close. Mrs. Alvarez from 2B left her apartment door open while she carried laundry to the basement. Mr. Granger, the retired bus driver, sat by the front window with a newspaper and a cup of tea, no longer afraid that every knock meant another notice. On the 3rd floor, Mariah opened her kitchen cabinet and counted cans not because she was afraid there would be none, but because she was planning dinner for Sunday. That was the kind of miracle nobody puts on a billboard. Food enough to plan ahead. Heat that came on when the temperature dropped. A lock that worked. A child who slept through the night because the adults were no longer whispering about where they would go next. Nia had changed too, in the small ways children change when they stop bracing for loss. She left her stuffed rabbit on the bed now instead of carrying it from room to room. She taped drawings to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a peach. She asked if she could invite a friend over after school, and Mariah had to turn away for a second because that question, simple as it was, felt like a door opening inside her chest. Children do not ask to invite friends into places they are afraid to lose. Spencer Booker Voss came by that morning without a driver. He parked 2 blocks away and walked, carrying a cardboard box under one arm. He no longer arrived like a man entering a property. He arrived like a man entering a debt. Inside the box were copies of the first quarterly report from the Delancey Housing Trust, the nonprofit foundation he had created and funded with the profits from the canceled marina deal. The same deal that once would have turned 14 units into luxury rentals now paid for legal representation, emergency rent relief, building repairs, and tenant ownership counseling across the neighborhood. It did not fix the city. It did not erase every mistake. But it changed what his money was allowed to do. For the first time in his life, Spencer had built something that did not require someone else to disappear. Mariah found him in the lobby, standing near the mailboxes, looking at the wall where eviction notices used to be taped. There was a bulletin board there now. Job postings. After-school programs. A flyer for a free clinic. A handwritten note from Nia that said, "Please do not throw away the crayons in the community room. We need all the colors." Spencer smiled when he saw it, but there was sadness behind the smile, the kind that does not ask to be comforted. Mariah stood beside him for a moment before speaking. "She wrote that herself," she said. Spencer nodded. "She is right," he answered. "You do need all the colors." Mariah looked at him then, really looked at him, and what passed between them was not forgiveness wrapped in a clean ribbon. It was something more honest. A beginning. "The repairs on the west stairwell are finished," she said. "Mrs. Alvarez said the heat is working better." Spencer nodded again. "Good." He paused. "And your classes?" Mariah looked down for a second, almost shy, almost surprised to hear someone ask about a future that belonged to her. "I start the housing advocate training next month." Spencer turned toward her. "You will be good at it." Mariah gave a small laugh, not bitter, not broken. "I already know what the forms feel like from the other side." That sentence stayed with him. Later, when the chairs were folded and the coffee was gone and the children had dragged sidewalk chalk across the pavement in pink and blue lines, Spencer walked upstairs to the 3rd floor. He did not enter Mariah's apartment. He stopped at the doorway while Nia showed him the plant on the windowsill, a small basil plant in a chipped mug. "Mama says if it keeps growing we can use it in spaghetti," Nia said. Spencer looked at the tiny green leaves reaching toward the glass. Outside, the city moved the way it always moved, buses groaning, horns tapping, someone calling from across the street. But inside that apartment there was a bed with sheets tucked in, shoes lined up under it, a cabinet with food inside, and a child talking about spaghetti like tomorrow was something she trusted. That was the ending Spencer had not known he was searching for. Not applause. Not redemption in one grand gesture. Just proof that when power finally lowers itself close enough to hear pain, it can stop being a wall and become a handrail. Mariah never became a symbol to him. He learned better than that. She was not poverty with a face. She was not a lesson placed in his path. She was a mother who had carried what no one should have to carry, and still refused to let hardship teach her cruelty. And Spencer was not saved because he felt sorry. He changed because he accepted responsibility. There is a difference. Pity looks at suffering and feels bad. Responsibility asks who built the conditions that made the suffering possible. By winter, Delancey Street was still Delancey Street. The sidewalks cracked. The laundromat light flickered. Rent was still too high in the city, and too many mothers still counted coins under fluorescent lights, still slept in cars, still smiled for their children while fear pressed behind their ribs. But in one building on one block, the machine had been stopped long enough for people to breathe. And sometimes that is where justice begins. Not with the whole world changing at once, but with one locked door opening, one notice torn down, one child sleeping safely, one powerful man finally understanding that the people beneath his numbers were never beneath him at all.